Hey there, it's Melissa Brunetti, and welcome to the Mind Your Own Karma podcast. Hey there, Karma Crew. Thanks for joining me for this episode of Mind Your Own Karma Beyond the Bandage. Today's guest is someone whose work lives at the intersection of science, soul, and lived experience. Dr. Maria Cronyn is a naturopathic doctor with over 25 years of experience, and she's also an adoptee who deeply understands how early trauma impacts the body. Maria specializes in complex chronic illness, think Lyme disease, hormone imbalances, autoimmune struggles, and she also takes a whole person approach that includes nutrition, homeopathy, even pharmaceuticals when necessary. But what really makes her stand out is her fierce belief that suppressed emotions and unprocessed trauma often shows up as physical illness, and that healing has to address both. She's here to talk about why hormone health is mental health, how emotions get trapped in the body, and how she's now bringing naturopathic medicine to trauma survivors through her nonprofit. This conversation is both real and full of hope, and I think you just might see parts of yourself in her story. It's time to rip off the bandage. Here is my interview with Dr. Maria Cronyn. We are welcoming Dr. Maria Cronyn to the show today. Hello.
Hi.
Finally, we have had our email thread is like 30 messages long. It's like, you're finally here. Yay. Yeah. So let's just jump right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm a naturopathic doctor, more than 20 years, lots of experience. I'm a late discovery adoptee. I found out when I was 11, and I have sought my own healing is kind of how you come to naturopathic medicine. I was in my 20s. I had horrific back pain after some military service. And I found this naturopath in Ontario, Canada, across the river from where I lived. He fixed everything in
Wow.
6 weeks. I had just gotten through a divorce. My body was aching. I didn't know what I wanted to do, and everything. Such a deep jump in how I felt overall. I just felt like I could take on the world. And I was thinking about getting a PhD in psychology or something, and I decided to go into this instead because I was so enamored with it. And that's when I found homeopathy.
Wow, you're lucky you found that at such an early age and it kind of, I mean, I didn't find somatic therapy until I was
Right?
55. So
Yeah.
I'm late. I'm late to the party, but I'm here.
Well, we keep looking for our healing, and I was
Yeah.
grateful to have found him for sure. He was exceptional.
Yeah. That's awesome. So you bring a wealth of knowledge as a naturopathic doctor and as someone with lived experience as an adoptee as well. So what perspectives have you gained personally that shaped your approach to healing?
Well, I started out in hospitals before I went to naturopathic school, and I found regular medicine to be quite barbaric
Hmm.
in so many circumstances. I was an x-ray tech. I was working with people with broken bones who are in pain,
Yeah.
and people who are hospitalized. And I love medicine, and I was so turned off. I was kind of already seeking alternative things like yoga and meditation and stuff. So I just
Hmm.
sort of um, started my own journey. I went through divorce, like I said, in my 20s as well. And the adoption stuff early on just I didn't know what it meant. I'm sure a lot of adoptees out there know as you continue this journey,
Yes.
you don't know until later how it all kind of retrospectively looks back. Um, More recently, so I'm 57 years old now. Um, when you get that kind of postmenopausal perspective, you look
Mm.
back. And then also in the research, at the adopted community, somebody in homeopathy in India, which is where a lot of the greatest research comes out of, narrowed down some categories, and the biggest ones are fear and grief. And it was so I treat myself at times. I've taken almost every remedy I've ever given to anybody else because I'm also that kind of doctor.
Yeah.
I'm a prover, meaning I take my own medication, I make
Mm-hmm.
my own notes, and I know how this should work. And it was absolutely life-changing. We all have an element of PTSD, of course, and sometimes life throws you a curveball and you're quite triggered for,
Mm-hmm.
could be quite a long time. And it was absolutely life-changing for me. And different ways I approached people with different grief and trauma and adoptees and stuff. It was changed. So medicine is ever evolving and I evolve with it. Paid more attention to my own adoption trauma as the years went on. And through reunion and stuff like that, still not understanding the trauma
Mm.
as well as you can in retrospect. So I've got a lot of insights on where people are in their different phases of their journey, how to help them right there, which
That's
is the most
awesome.
important thing because it's not like you could say to somebody, look, you're going to have this problem when you're 50, so let's deal with it. No, you can't do that. You have to be right where they are, which is where homeopathy is so exceptional. You literally want to hear all the symptoms of what the patient is experiencing. One person's adoption experience is completely different from somebody else's, but it's how they express.
Yeah.
And as we know, grief can look like a lot of things.
Right.
Somebody can present as extremely angry right then and there. They're like, I'm angry all the time. And that's one remedy. Or somebody can be completely shut down, disconnected, dissociated, and out of touch with their feelings and maybe suppressed emotions or something. And that's a completely other remedy.
Yeah, and that's what's great. I think about what you do is it's very individualized instead of trying to squeeze somebody in a box like traditional medicine tries to do a lot of times. Even if you don't fit in the box, they try to squish you in there and push a pill to you and, hopefully this
Same
works.
pill for everybody, right? I mean, that's how
Right?
it really started for me. I was going to be a psychologist and maybe get a PsyD or a PhD was what I thought because I was so in love with psychology.
Mm,
And I found medicine to be a bit barbaric. In fact, I took like neuropsych and they were doing the animal experiments and I was so turned off,
yeah.
right? And then I found homeopathy and I was like, what could be better?
Mm, yeah.
What could be better than this?
Yeah.
If you go in and you have, you could literally come in with, I'll just ramble off some symptoms, chronic constipation, sleeplessness, anxiety, and you bite your nails, and you're really sensitive to weather changes. Plus a whole host of other problems, right? That I'll ask different questions and we'll go through different things. And those might be the exact symptoms that I prescribe on, and the remedy is like poison ivy.
Wow.
It's through the filtering down of, finding the biggest priority of symptoms. What bothers you most?
Mm,
Tell me
hmm.
what that is really like,
Yeah.
and you ask so many detailed questions. Well, you say nightmares. What do you mean by nightmares? Give me a little more detail on that. And then finding the closest fit. And the remedy could be, animal, vegetable, or mineral, could be any number of remedies. Um, Remedies are made from, there's one very strong remedy that's a hallucinogen in a plant that's very highly recommended in the adoptee community from the research from the Banerjees.
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing to me. Very well-known
Wow.
remedy for fear and rage.
Wow.
Yeah, getting in touch with those core, prioritizing what symptoms with. What's the most important
Mm-hmm.
thing? That's through the discussion, the symptoms, but certainly if somebody comes in with a chronic disease or even cancer, when somebody comes in and says they're adopted, that's like at the top of the list, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think that's the case for other. mental health and medical practitioners. If
Yeah,
somebody's
I don't
adopted
think
and they
so.
don't know their past medical history, they just kind of move on.
Yep. That's for sure.
And it's uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, it sure is. What, if you had someone coming to you, what's your approach to someone that's new to this kind of modality?
There's often a lot of education in it, and I'm at times kind of thankful for Google, right? My profession, sadly, is not a household name like chiropractic. I wish it was.
Yeah, yeah.
But homeopathy in particular, there's a lot of confusion. So I have to sort of, point them to a little bit of reading and how it exactly works and how our time together is gonna go. I'm like usually 2 weeks, we'll start to, we'll get to know each other. I'll start prescribing. We'll follow up within 10 days. We'll see what changes have already taken place, and then we'll, re-prescribe maybe something else, or maybe we're completely on the right track. But either way, we'll have a lot of information already. Because even if the first remedy is always a very important prescription, you have to see how it unfolds.
Hmm.
It can unfold extremely strongly, and they could just feel better, 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 or it's like a trail of breadcrumbs, and it can absolutely show you the door that you need to go through.
Right. Yeah.
So it's very, very important, and somebody paying very close attention to how they're responding to the remedy. I'm like, keep notes.
Hmm.
If you have a weird dream, write it down because you'll forget.
Yeah.
Pay attention to what you're thinking about. Pay attention to what you're craving. Pay attention to how you're sleeping after you take it, and report all that back to me.
Yeah. And those are all things that people don't do on a daily basis. They don't listen to what their body's trying to tell them at all. And
Yeah,
that's what gets us into this problem in the first place.
right.
We tune out instead of tuning in, right?
Yeah, we've become a nation really that is so over medicated, and that
Oh my
it's
gosh.
shocking the speed that somebody will be given a prescription,
Oh yeah.
and
Yeah,
then
it's
the
crazy.
prescription will be doubled and even add three other prescriptions on top of it just for
Yeah. I
my
mean,
own situation.
I still do ultrasound 3 days a week and I get let's start looking at a patient's clinical notes and it's like 2 pages of a list of medications. I'm like, how are
Yeah.
you walking around right now? How are you even here? Like,
That was not the case when I graduated.
it's crazy.
We are so over medicated at this
Yeah.
point. It's difficult, and it's to the
Well, and
point.
then this doctor over here doesn't know what this doctor's prescribed you, and then you just end
Yeah,
up with this huge, huge list of I don't even, like I said, I
it's
don't even know how you're still here
yeah,
taking 25 medications.
I'm starting to even think it has to be very, very clear to people that you're seeking my kind of treatment because
Yeah.
so many people are so medicated.
Yeah.
And I almost want to say they have a desire to be sober, even.
Mm,
Like if they don't even have a desire to change or
yes.
get off of certain medications that might be very detrimental to something like their memory or something, then
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to work out.
How do you collaborate with what's already being prescribed and what the other, what another doctor is telling them?
Yeah, carefully, right?
Yeah.
Um, I have had many cases where the prescriptions were absolutely necessary and not going to change. But when we're talking about mental health and I see somebody having terrible side effects, especially something like inability to concentrate, and that's what they're supposed to be getting treated for.
Hmm.
You can't even have a conversation. They can't hold a train of thought, and they have no forethought when they arrive. And I'm just continually starting over and over and over because the patient has their memory is very poor, their forethought is awful, and it's very hard for them to maintain focus. And I have to say, the medication you're taking isn't working. Let's change it.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of it.
Yeah.
I can re-prescribe something else, but there's dependency here too.
Yeah. I look forward to a
And if
day
there's
where,
resistance, it's
yeah.
probably not going to work out.
Yeah. Well, I look forward to the day that we can all collaborate together for the sake of the patient, and that they start looking to people like you and I that do, some alternative or what's considered alternative methods um, for the benefit of the patient. I mean, there's so
It's,
much out there.
yeah, it's, I'm a naturopath and every patient goes around saying, my doctor doesn't listen to me. Well, we're the doctors who listen,
Yeah.
right? We're the ones
Yeah.
who listen to your whole case. We would love to talk to your doctors, but your other doctors
Yes.
often don't have time, and that may never happen. And also, it's a terrible position to be put in to give contradictory information, but when you know you're right and you have to explain it to the patient and let them decide,
Mm-hmm.
other doctor and you have opposing views.
Yeah.
But very often when it comes to, heavier medication and stuff like that, the doctor will agree.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Yeah.
they're like,
It's
I'm tied. I have to give her this medication. If you have something better, let's go for it.
yeah.
Because
Maybe
people
someday.
are over medicated, right?
Well, and the other thing is patients don't realize that they don't have to do what their doctor wants them to do. Like,
I
I'm
have
not
often
saying
had
go
to
against
tell them
medical
that.
advice. I'm not saying that, but I'm an ultrasonographer. I get people all the time like, oh, I want to do this part of the test, but I really,
Yes.
is that okay? I'm like, you're the patient.
Yeah.
Yes, it's okay. You
Yeah.
can
You're the
refuse.
customer.
Yeah, you don't have to do it. Your doctor did. Yes, they prescribed it, but you're in charge. And a lot of people are like, I am, you know.
People often ask me, well, why did my doctor do this to me? Or why didn't my doctor
Mm,
say what you're saying? And
they're
why
not
did they
trained.
give me this medication? And I say, you went to the doctor and told them you needed something for this ailment, and that's what they have.
Yep.
That's all they have. I went to a completely different school than they did, even though I know most of what they do also,
Yeah.
but I don't dabble in but you went in there, they have to treat you. They have to treat what you came in for.
Yeah.
It might be kind of a crappy prescription that doesn't even work, but that's all they have. There's a standard of care. If you went in for, let's kind of keep it simple, constipation, they're going to give you some lousy
Mhm.
constipation, probably over the counter thing that doesn't work.
Yeah.
Then you come and see somebody like me, and I'm going to like do all these different things, and you're going to feel so much better. And it has nothing to do with the kind of lousy prescription you didn't get at the doctor.
Yeah. And they're not trained to dig any deeper or,
Time either.
half the time they won't even send you to a therapist, which, might be something like that might be what you need. I've heard that before too, that I had a gastroenterologist on, had a patient who only eliminated once a month. And it was due to some horrific trauma that she went through in her childhood. And once he sent her to a psychotherapist and she worked through that, it took her like 3 months and she was fine. Didn't need medication.
Yeah, there's so many. Well, we've at least gotten out of the insurance model of you need a referral for everything.
Hmm.
And we're in such a absolute barrage of mental health services. You can get on with a mental health professional within the day on a telehealth, basically anywhere
Yeah.
in the country at this point.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's the right fit.
Yeah. Sometimes it takes a minute to find,
Yeah,
yeah,
well,
the
in
right.
the adopted community, myself and probably everybody else, we don't find the right fit very easily, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's difficult.
And
Well,
I'm hoping to fill that gap,
yes. Yeah.
because myself and so many others I had bad experiences with therapists saying I was arrogant and ungrateful,
Wow.
you know.
Instead of meeting you where you're at. Hello.
No, why would you do that? I had a therapist who didn't identify herself as a Catholic nun. I had no idea.
Oh, wow.
I'm breaking a commandment, talking about the problems that I have with my mom. You're supposed to
Oh
honor
my
your
goodness.
father and your mother.
Wow.
And she told me that I was arrogant and she wanted to slap me
Oh my God.
in the session.
Think you're
The
in the
last
wrong,
the
you're in the
last
wrong
session,
profession,
of
lady.
course.
Wow.
And that was my support
Yeah.
of my extreme troubles with fitting into my family and seeking help.
Yeah.
And there were others, you can't, I have a strong opinion about EMDR and complex trauma. It's entirely practitioner dependent. And when you have very complex trauma, you're not going to get there,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
There's too much that's
Yeah.
kind of unspeakable, first of all, and it's not event by event. And you're not going to desensitize adoption.
Yeah. I find that it helps a lot of adoptees, but it doesn't get them to where they need to be. Um, so like I always say, everybody's healing combination's different and it works for you great.
Yeah,
And, but yeah, it's kind of hit or miss from what I hear from my clients that come from EMDR. Like I said, it's helped somewhat,
very
but it
good.
just hasn't gotten them to the actual root of it. So,
People are Googling and shopping, and they're doing things that other people are doing. And I would love for people to. So, I was a primary care physician taking insurance in Vermont until I moved to Arizona less than a year ago. And, I organize people's care as a primary care. And people need to find a primary care or somebody who's like the base,
mhm.
guide them. Like, don't do this first.
Yeah.
And well, you've been going to a therapist. How's it going? Oh, well, I get really upset all the time. Okay, well, let's switch.
Hmm.
I mean, I would do that for a physical therapist too.
Yeah.
Let me
Yeah.
organize your care. There's some
Yeah.
things you should do first. There are some things you shouldn't do at certain times of your life. Maybe you're in a transition period and trauma work, it's not the right time.
Yeah.
Help me set the priorities for you so that it goes smoother.
Yeah. But you don't have doctors that do that. I thankfully had a doctor that was moving. And he was like, okay, your personality, I know you. Like, I think you should see this doctor. I think this would be a good fit. And he, literally like circled the name on, he had like all these doctors on a piece of paper that he was like sending people to, but he literally like tried to match you with a
Mm.
physician that he thought you would click with. And I was like, who does that? That's so nice. Thank you. I mean, usually you're just on your own, floating around trying to find the right person, right?
Well, so many people are, and you've gotta listen to what people are saying. Who's a good doctor? Who's going to make those good referrals for you?
Hmm.
Are they networked, and
Yeah.
can they help you with organizing your care?
Yeah.
I got here, I joined doctors networking groups and stuff like that, and I already have a bank of people to refer to, but I'm also in a network where I can ask all the doctors in that group,
Yeah.
hundreds of them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
And
perfect.
we help each other out.
Yeah, I love that.
That's what you definitely want to do, because people can be searching and searching and not find the help they need.
Right. You often say hormone health is mental health, and
Yes, I do.
you may need antibiotics, not antipsychotics.
I say that also, yes.
Can you unpack that a little bit and how it applies to people that you serve?
So I was in the Northeast for a lot of my life, and I got Lyme disease probably more than once. And I can tell you from personal experience, but also from the hundreds of people that I've worked with, Lyme disease can cause terrible psychiatric symptoms.
Hmm.
Terrible psychiatric symptoms
Like what?
like anxiety, terrible mood swings. You don't know what you're feeling. You don't understand why you're feeling this way. Um, the symptoms are so severe because it's a nervous system infection.
Hmm.
And if you don't put two and two together, and a lot of people don't get the bullseye rash, somebody
Right.
might not even know they've been bitten. It's going to be case taking, examining, and testing, and get that test out as quickly as you can, but also prophylactically, maybe start an antibiotic and see if it makes a dent while you're waiting for the test to come back.
Hmm.
I've seen people go on antidepressants and anxiety medication, and they had Lyme disease and babesia.
Wow. Ha-
The nerve, and then there's for children, PANS and PANDAS, which is just a pediatric onset. A
mm,
strep infection can cause some pretty intense behavior changes in children. And if that goes untreated into adulthood, you can have some pretty complex inflammation of the brain that was down to an infection that really required maybe a semi-prolonged period of antibiotics.
wow.
And I'll meet somebody who's 26 years old and now they're on 3 or 4 or 5 psychiatric medications and have done several inpatient stays as a teenager in a psych facility, and they're traumatized, of course.
Hmm.
And then we run a test for something like, have you had pandas in the past and Lyme disease in the past? And they definitely had.
Wow. And didn't even know it.
And didn't even know it. Nobody tested for it. And they were put
Wow.
on psychiatric medication in the blink of an eye.
That's crazy.
And it's really tragic
Yeah.
because it can have very disastrous consequences for your social development, your academic career, everything.
Yeah.
I have never met anybody who had a positive experience with going inpatient psych to date. It's traumatic, particularly when you're young.
Yeah. Have you seen unprocessed trauma contribute to a chronic illness?
I believe so. I mean, it's hard to put two and two together. So you have trauma, you had asked earlier about hormones and then infections, right? Um, if we're women, you understand hormones. But people don't really understand hormones will blindside you. Very often, I'll stabilize somebody's hormones if possible first, and then get more into the trauma
Mm,
or at the same time. Because what am I looking at? Are you so anxious and sleepless and you can't sit still because it's going to be a full moon in 4 days and you're premenstrual, or trauma? Because the trauma will resurface
hmm.
when the hormones are all out of whack, right?
Yeah.
It's very easy to be re-traumatized when you're extremely irritable and having mood swings and maybe sleepless.
Yeah.
You're fragile.
Right.
So I wish somebody had given me progesterone cream when I was a teenager
Oh, wow.
because it's so helpful. And so many women will feel better, premenstrually at the very least, because it will blindside you. But
Yeah.
we're also in an epidemic of birth control. We don't know exactly. There's so many dissociated young girls out there on birth control. They'll give birth control at the same time a packet of or a bottle of antidepressant.
Mm.
Same time.
And so what are you seeing? What are the
What could
problems
go
that
wrong?
come up with that?
Go wrong with that? So the
It,
antidepressant is for the side effects of the birth control.
oh, okay.
Yeah, automatic,
Okay.
automatic.
Hmm.
There are studies not in this country on autism and the use of progestin-based birth control contributing to autism.
Oh, wow.
These
Interesting.
artificial hormones are not always a great idea, and they cause pretty serious side effects. I've met many young girls who never had a natural period. They were put on birth control before their period even started. They're blind to the entire hormone picture. Their natural period is overridden by
Yeah.
birth control.
Yeah. I see that a lot. At my work, they'll come in for a pelvic ultrasound because
Yeah,
for amenorrhea, all the time. See that a lot. Or irregular, very irregular menstrual cycles.
there's side effects from birth control that are treated with psychiatric medication, just like that.
Yeah.
And then
That's crazy.
you're walking around with artificial hormones and psychiatric medication and you're 18 years
Yeah.
old. Like, what could go wrong?
Right.
It's a high risk situation in my
Well, your doctor gave it to you, so you think you're
and
golden, right?
people are obedient, right? They want to
Yes.
feel better. And this is
Right.
what they're
Yes.
presented with as the solution, and they think it's going to work. It often
Yeah.
doesn't work.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people think that um, I think it's like, give me a pill because that will help me. Like, if you don't give me a pill, that's not going to help me. Like, give me something when they go to the doctor. They're expecting it. They're expecting to take a prescription out of there for something.
Right. I know exactly what's going to be given to somebody when they come. When somebody does an intake form and I take a look at it before they arrive, I know exactly before I even read the medication list what they've already been given,
Yep.
the symptoms that they have, right?
Yep. Yep.
And
I
you're
can
here,
look at a
so I know
person's
it didn't
physical.
work.
You look at a person's physical body, and I'm like, you're on high blood pressure medicine, you're diabetic, and
Yeah,
you have hypertension, high cholesterol. Yeah. So I
usually
know those three medications you're on right now.
my initial intake is usually about 90 minutes, and I'll explain things to people about why they're feeling the way that they're feeling, maybe because of a side effect of medication or say trauma. I mean, I've had people look at me with eyes like saucers going, I never put that together.
Hmm.
I go, yeah, I think, I remember one woman just off the top of my head, and she had anxiety, and I can't remember what else she came in for, but I talk at length with people. Well, how do you feel about this? And how do you feel about that? And, your physical symptoms, and I have to do a physical and stuff like that. And she was upset about her mother. And I said, is your mother a narcissist? And she said, I think so. I said, do you understand what that means? And she said, no, not really. And I gave her a book. And I said, bring this back when you come back in 2 weeks. And she came back and she's like, I had no idea the far
Yeah.
reaching. And somebody wrote in a book how I felt because it was inarticulable how
Hmm.
I was feeling. And I
Wow.
think adoptees face the same thing. It's
Yeah.
so intense and there's no words and you're just dissociating when you're very traumatized or you just don't understand.
Yeah, that's why the community
Feeling.
and telling our stories is so huge because I've had
Exactly.
so many people like, oh my gosh, I thought I was the only one feeling that way. They
Exactly.
have no idea. Yeah. It's the,
Exactly right. People
yeah.
need to, and hopefully, you come to somebody like me, or hopefully more and more practitioners are going to put those
Hmm.
symptoms together and get to the root cause for you
Yeah.
because people are falling into the throes of addiction and suicidality and thinking they're all alone in this. I said to
Hmm.
someone once that in the adoptee community, suicidality is so high, it's normal. I said it's so
Hmm.
high in this population of people. It's like normal to feel that way.
Yeah.
So many people do. And she's like, I feel so much better just understanding that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
We don't, yeah. It's those subjects that are taboo, um, like suicide and things like that, well, let's just not talk about them because, it's not something that we want to bring up. But those are the things that we need to start talking about because people are struggling and they do feel alone. And so these taboo subjects, need to
There
be
is,
brought out into the light and some education for people because they're just struggling.
as an adopted person, and so many of us must feel the exact same way. The truth is the most important thing.
Hmm.
I can tell
Yeah.
when people are lying to me and they don't want to dig any deeper. And, what are you going to do?
Yeah. Yeah.
The truth is the most important thing, but there's such a fear. I feel it's an archetypal fear. You know what I mean by archetypal? It's
Hmm.
like practically in all of us of like psychiatric hospitals.
Oh, yeah.
Such a fearful thing that people don't express that kind of a thing. And like we had said earlier, just because somebody wants to give you a medication doesn't mean you have to take it, but you need to express how you feel. Like, how bad is this?
Yeah.
And, the levels of it.
Yeah.
Part
You
of my,
definitely have to advocate for yourself and educate yourself as much as possible because if you don't, you are going to end up being one of those victims of 25 lists of medications that you're taking, and you're going to end up feeling worse instead of feeling better. So you really have
part
to
of my,
advocate.
yeah, part of my advocacy for adoptees is going to be educating mental health and medical professionals about these risk factors
Yeah.
because the risk factors are there. And just because an adopted adult says to you, sometimes I feel suicidal, you need to dig deeper because this is
Hmm.
normal in this population. And you need to say to them, you're at very high risk of feeling that way.
Yeah.
Tell me a little more about that. Or
Hmm.
how about let's, reinforce that you have some understanding and say, I'm sorry you're feeling this way.
Yeah.
One person, I was 56 years old. I said I was adopted to someone, and she said, I'm sorry. How many times has somebody said that to you? That never happened to me before.
Never.
How about a little
Never.
support in a little sensitivity and support in just the adoption arena to begin with?
Yeah.
Uh, and then a primary care doctor who may or may not be in a hurry, but literally, this is a risk factor. Somebody says they're adopted, ask a couple more questions. What are
Hmm.
you doing with your mental health?
Yeah. Just that
Are you
simple.
getting the proper help around this when you feel, dissociated or really dark thoughts come up or you're really struggling around something? And it's going to
Yeah.
happen at life's milestones,
Hmm.
marriage,
Yes.
having children, a very tough time in your life. Maybe you lose your job or your spouse passes away or,
Yeah.
reunion,
Yeah.
and help them find the support that they need, or at least acknowledge
Right.
that these risk
Yeah.
factors are so high.
Yeah. That's one risk factor that we don't talk about. Talk about all these other genetic risk factors,
I
does this
think
run
it
in your
needs to
family? Does that
be,
run in your family? But we don't
I
go
think it needs,
there.
I think it needs to be front and center.
No, I do too. Yeah. So what approaches have you found most helpful for trauma survivors in what you do?
So people can come in a variety of states of poor health, right? And have trauma. We know that a lot of adoptees and people who have trauma will descend into addiction, right? And we
Hmm.
want to try, you have to treat the whole person. And if they're already going into addiction, and now we have such a compounded pharmaceutical problem with addiction too, you have to address the whole thing at the same time. That's where homeopathy can be most excellent because you can address maybe medication side effects at the same time.
Hmm.
You can start tapering if they're really, spacing out on a medication, and you can hit the target head on without interfering or causing some negative side effect like adding a medication. You can treat somebody for, say, rage or grief, and they can actually kind of look the same, right? People can be
Yeah.
hysterical from grief, or people can be shut down from grief, or people can be really, needing to manage their anger from grief because it's so hard to talk about.
Yeah.
And a homeopathic remedy will get right in there without some toxic side effect and potentially very, very quickly.
Yeah.
And if you can take that off of someone and they can experience like this lift that was like, wow, I had no idea what you were doing and what you were giving me, but wow, did that work?
Yeah.
And then you
For
opened the door and then you can start
right.
to proceed.
Yeah. For someone who maybe feels like they're drowning in the traditional medical system and wants to maybe look at more of a natural approach, what are some first steps for them to start taking?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's so different. I call it all a singularity. Everybody's story and where they are in their life is so singularly unique. But start to look, I'm here. I do telehealth, obviously, but start to look for, ask your friends and ask family members who they talk to, etc. Some people are also without resources. Hopefully, they're listening to things like this. Find a naturopath, find a homeopath, start getting on that path. Ask your primary care doctor who's prescribing all of this stuff, or your nurse practitioner who's prescribing all this stuff. Say, I don't want to do this.
Mm,
How can I start to taper and get off of this?
yeah, and
And
if they're
find out
not
the person
willing
who's
to
supportive.
discuss that, then it's time to find another doctor.
Exactly. You've got to find the right support.
Yeah.
And if all they have for you is more psychiatric medication and they're resistant to helping you, even if you feel terrible on it, you need to find somebody else.
Or if your doctor gets, feels personally attacked because you're questioning the care that you're getting, or, then that's another red flag right there too.
I
Probably
mean,
need to find
I've
somebody
had to
else.
talk down so many patients getting so upset by what their doctor, how gaslit they are by
Yeah.
the doctor.
Oh,
I,
yeah.
I had a young girl with, she definitely had Lyme disease and was treated for it, but not long enough. But there was a suspicion she had a strep infection months before. She just suddenly changed and became very aggressive, very young
Mm,
child. And the mom was talking, and all they were telling her to do was go to psych, go to psych, go to psych.
which is way more traumatizing.
And I gave her antibiotics, and she recovered.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They knew she had that infection, and they just automatically, within a couple weeks, the behavior had changed so drastically. The child is still sick.
Hmm.
Kids get upset, right? And they were just like, "Oh yeah, she had this infection, but I don't care. She's got to go to psych now."
Yeah, and how frustrating for her because she probably feels not listened to
Oh,
and feels like something's still wrong and very confused as to, what's going on, and
it's very hard
scary.
to even ask questions of your nurse practitioner or your
Hmm.
primary care physician very often
Yeah.
because people, first of all, you're not feeling well, right? So, like, I'll have too long of an interview even. I'm trying to extract all of that information from
Hmm.
you and encouraging getting to know you even better.
Yeah.
And when you go to primary care, very often you're not listened to at all. You forget to ask. You feel gaslit. You feel just not heard at all.
I went to my doctor with a laundry list of things, and she like had all these bullet, okay, we're gonna do this first, that, and she's, we're going through, and about a quarter of the way in, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. This doesn't feel right. I was just like, I need a break. And she's like, but we had this whole plan and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, I know, but I can't. And she's just like, okay, she was like fine with it, where some doctors would have just
Exhausting.
like blown up and, but yeah. So
It
if
can be
you're,
exhausting and
yeah.
working. I understand when people need to take breaks. Sometimes I have to send them back to their primary care physician, but I'll organize them
Hmm.
or even reach out to the doctor to make it easier on them because all these appointments, like what you're
Yeah.
experiencing, it's so
It's
exhausting.
overwhelming. Yeah. It's
It's so
overwhelming.
overwhelming. And then if somebody really is very unwell in whatever arena, they might just stop looking for care
Yeah.
and just
True. Well,
and
tell us about your nonprofit, what its mission and
yeah, so it's
yeah, tell us about it.
unfolding for sure. I have a couple board members, they're both physicians who I'm hoping will guide me to how this will make the biggest impact. So it's called Adoption Evolution, but it's definitely going to shift probably into a DBA because I definitely feel like foster care and trafficking victims but also the people that love adoptees. These are the numbers that we're talking about. You have one adopted person. Well, how many people are around that person,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
We've got two biological parents, two adoptive parents, typically. Maybe you've got a spouse, maybe you've got children, you've got siblings, you've got friends, you've got grandparents that can all benefit from education around adoption
Hmm.
to
Yeah.
support, to be a supportive family, right? At any age.
Yeah.
So the mission is to validate, first of all, adoption trauma, um, educate everyone in the whole sphere, and then advocacy, hopefully. And that should look pretty significant, I think, particularly for the
Yeah.
foster care system.
That's awesome. Like, how are you bringing this to adoption agencies, or what are you bringing this to?
I, for example, yesterday I was at the domestic violence shelter here in
Okay.
Phoenix, Children's Center, and they're going to let me do an hour a week. And I'm going to try to because it's like there's a movie called Phantom Thread, and I love the name Phantom Thread, but adoption is this thread going through all these horrific circumstances that is unacknowledged. So you can have a domestic violence survivor, maybe with some addiction problems, and maybe they themselves were adopted. Maybe they've had their children taken by CPS.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, adoption is all in there,
Yeah.
potentially as a core.
Right.
And, or maybe their spouse was adopted and that was the violent one.
Mm.
I'm looking to start to pull through with other nonprofits and foster care, emphasizing the trauma needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
And maybe even rehab facilities. How many adoptees do you have in there? Because I know it's a lot. Are you asking? Are you counting?
Yeah.
You talk about it. Right? Let me
Right.
talk with the rehab facility. You know, raise your hand if you're adopted. Like,
Yeah. Or been in the foster care system, or
according to the
yeah.
statistics, it's going to be about 40%.
Yeah. Yeah. Same with
You know
prison. I
about that.
hear. Yeah.
Yeah. What have you done about that?
Yeah.
How have you addressed that? Have you ever talked about it? There are men in prison. There was a quote from a man in prison, and they said, what do you think would have helped you to not wind up here? And he said, grief counseling.
Mm. Yeah.
Said
Being heard, being
if I could have
seen.
managed my emotions and
Yeah.
dealt with my grief, I wouldn't have been so hot-headed, rash, impulsive, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
There's so much education that needs to happen. It's
so much.
sometimes it's just overwhelming to me.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I'm going to educate medical professionals. Like, don't ignore this giant red flag.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a social situation that is going to affect and at any age. If a person is adopted, ask
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5 follow-up questions about their mental health, possibly addiction, and make the appropriate referrals because the consequences could be quite disastrous.
Yeah.
I mean, most women go to the doctor and men don't. How many women are seeking mental health care and not getting asked? Like, I'm wondering, just right now, I'm wondering how many women are moms of adopted children
Mm.
and their doctor doesn't know that,
Yeah.
and they're struggling with their parenting.
Yeah. I mean, have I ever been
Oh,
asked if
God.
I was adopted on an intake? Never. Never.
How many? I'm taking these classes with Case in Maryland, the Center for Adoption Support and Education.
Mm-hmm.
And how many parents are struggling with their own mental health with their parenting?
Yeah. Yeah, and they don't understand the root cause of it.
It's so complex.
Yeah,
You need to
it
just
is.
start asking, are you adopted? Are your children adopted? Or is your spouse adopted, perhaps? The conversations just kind of keep evolving,
Mm-hmm.
but talking about adoption and then I'm working with Friends of Foster Care. And they have a program where they work with people who age out of foster care. They work with them till they're 26.
Oh, wow.
That is brilliant. And I'm going to try to
Yeah.
hire 2 people out of that program and get them to talk about their experience
Mm-hmm.
and, the narrative that needs to,
Yeah,
these are your identity issues.
right.
This is the trauma. You need to grow your identity from whatever your origin stories are.
Yeah.
You need to solidify that and tell the truth about your trauma, particularly to yourself, and understand yourself. It needs
And
to be
have some
validated.
compassion. Yeah.
It absolutely needs to be validated I mean, you're adopted, I'm adopted. There's not a moment, even probably in our sleep, it's our identity. We are
Mm.
adopted
Yeah.
every
Yeah.
minute of the day.
Yeah.
Right?
There's no pill to take for that.
It's our identity.
Right.
And it's born of trauma. I had blowback one time in a discussion group with the psychiatry discussion group about adoption even being trauma.
Oh my goodness.
And
That's
I said,
crazy.
what could be more traumatic than a child who doesn't have parents, that has
Yeah.
to be raised by somebody else? And I was
Yeah.
just really blunt about it. And I
Yeah.
felt like I needed to be. I
I
had
was
to
going to say you had to
shut
be.
down.
I was going to say,
I
yeah,
had to shut that
definitely.
down. I was like,
Right. Yeah, there's a lot of
adoption is
education
born
that needs
of
to happen.
trauma. There is loss, number one,
Yeah.
that can never be forgotten. It's not, and we all know the story. We have to be grateful, and it's the solution to all the problems that you're ever going to have to be adopted. Well, I'm going to be talking with some foster kids who weren't adopted
Yeah.
about what they think adoption means.
Mm,
And I've also talked to people who were adopted and then given back.
yeah. Rehoming. Oh my gosh. That's a whole
This
nother
trauma.
episode.
And then what are we going to do about that, right? What do
Yeah.
we do with that kind of trauma? Well, first, you've got to be truthful.
Yeah.
It hurts, right? And then I dig deep and we hash it out and we talk about it, and I'll find remedies that fit, and hopefully it will just give your nervous system enough calming, because there's nothing other than to accept what has happened and find the strength in your story to come to terms with it.
Hmm.
And you have to validate it all day long
Yeah.
and educate all around it. You're not the only one that feels that way. Everybody feels that way. These are the statistics. This is how you should feel. And me saying that should make you feel better. You're
Yeah.
not alone
Right. Yeah.
in feeling that way.
Right.
It's like normal to feel that way. And you're going to
S-
get through this, right?
Yeah. I mean, I do believe that what we go through can become our superpower. I mean, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing with somatic work. You wouldn't be where you're at today if, partially because of what we went through, and then you want to help somebody else. And I think that's the whole purpose of even going through something is,
That is probably going to be part of the mission, is because now I've spent some time online and talked to different people and stuff like that. As adopted adults, particularly, like I was born in the 60s. I don't know, you're probably right after me. People didn't talk about it and stuff. We need to get together and be like mentors.
yeah, exactly.
Exactly what you said. Now you have to help somebody else, and in doing that, you're going to feel better.
Hmm.
So I want to get like a legion of helpers.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. Where can we find you? Do you have a website?
Yep,
What's happening?
drmariacronin.com.
Okay, so we will put that in the show notes so people
Yeah,
can
I'm in
find you and see what you're
Scottsdale,
doing.
but I'm certainly available on telehealth. Um, and then Adoption Evolution is, I think I'm on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, and I'll be adding some more.
Ooh, I think I need those. I need those links to put in the show notes. I don't think I have those. So send those to me so I can put those in the show
So many
notes.
things happening at once. I need to get my podcast guy to come back to my house and hook me up with all my links.
So do you have a podcast? Is it?
I do. It's my
Oh,
name. And then I
oh,
have another one, Adoption Evolution.
oh my gosh. Two of them? I don't know how
And
you do it.
everything has been happening, it seems, for years, but it's only been months.
Yeah.
Very infancy stage on all of it. It's all happening at the same time. So watch
Okay,
for
well,
that and watch
yeah.
it grow. Maybe you'll come on mine and talk.
Yeah, sure. Anytime. Yeah. So any other links that you want people to find you, to send those to me. I'll
Well,
have
you
them in
can
the show
find
notes.
everything just under my name. Just look for Dr. Maria
Okay.
Cronin. Cronin
All
with a
right.
Y.
Okay. Well, thanks so much for coming on today. I really love the approach
Thank
because
you.
that's, individuality in medical approaches has just got to be, it's got to become mainstream. That's just what needs to happen. So I love anybody that does that and just looks at the individual, meets them where they're at, and helps them. So thank you so
Exactly.
much for coming on the show and being a
You.
resource for the listeners. Maria is such a force, isn't she? I love how she brings both clinical wisdom and lived truth into the same space and reminds us that the body holds everything, whether it's grief, confusion, or trauma from a long time ago. If it's not expressed, it's stored. If something clicked for you today, if your body's been whispering or even yelling, it might be time to start listening with compassion. And if you're looking for a way to gently explore the emotional layers underneath physical symptoms, you can always check out the somatic work that I do. Just visit somatichealingjourneys.com to learn more. And hey, if you have a unique healing modality or a message that the Karma Crew needs to hear, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at mindyourownkarma@gmail.com. Let's get you on the podcast. I hope this one listen changed your life today. And remember to take what you need and leave what you don't. And always remember to mind your own karma. I'll see you next time.